If I were in a seat, I'd be on the edge of it.
All right, here we go.
You are watching yet another episode of Mr. Wonderful. I'm not him. I'm just the guest. I'm Mike Rowe. Your questions, we answer them. It's going to be great.
Hi, my name's Monty. I'm 22. I'm a big fan of both Kevin and Mike. My question is about young people and the perception of success. It seems like for people of my generation, if you are a hard worker and you are interested in doing great things in life, it's almost the default path for you to go to university, get really good grades, and everybody wants to be a professor, everybody wants to be a doctor, everybody wants to be an investment banker. And it seems like simply getting a well-paid job in the trades, investing your money, running your own business, these things are swept under the rug and are seen as being less prestigious. And obviously, that's a big misconception. How can we address this misconception amongst youth? And what do you think are the best methods to reach out to young people, this message that following the path laid out for you is not necessarily going to be the right path for everybody? Thank you.
Mike, that's a big question, and he's got multiple levels in there. This idea of prestige, I've always been intrigued with that you take a path and take a history degree instead of becoming a plumber sounds like a pretty stupid thing. Prestige, what is that? Let's try and define that issue.
Well, let's start with his name, Monty. First thing I heard was Monty Hall. Let's make a deal, right? You're the man who makes deals, and what he's talking about fundamentally is a proposition, and it's a transactional proposition that will lead to some level of prestige. The answer is how much. So what we've been told for the last 45 years is that the best path for the most people happens to be the most expensive path.
But if you never get a college degree, does that make you a lesser person?
Well, it depends who you ask. A lot of people would say, yeah. What we did with college was we gave it a PR push, and it needed one back in the 60s and 70s. But we pushed it at the expense of all other forms of education. So college became a cautionary tale. If you don't get the 4-year degree, then you're going to wind up turning a wrench or being a welder or some such vocational consolation prize. We set the table wrong. We jacked with the very definition of prestige and thereby made it impossible for anyone who didn't have a degree, or at least very, very difficult, to compete for that prestige on a level playing field.
Look, I think my view of this, and I've been trying to get lots of people in their 20s to think it this way, the hardest job in the world is to break free from the family that gave you a cocoon and helped launch you.
Sure.
And then you finish whatever level of education you get. That could be high school. But at some point you're on your own. And you've got to go to work, you've got to make a living, and then eventually maybe support a family or a significant other, whatever it is. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day whether you're welding a car together or whether you're teaching in a high school or whether you're a doctor. You still have the same challenge. And I think great prestige is being someone who can actually successfully raise a family. That's what I tell people, because I don't really give a shit what you do, as long as you do it well, because
right.
You'll get paid well.
Well, speaking of shit, Dirty Jobs was an homage to a willingness to get dirty. And the first season of that show, I affirmatively looked for sewage workers, sewer inspectors. I looked for septic tank cleaners who became good at doing something most people didn't want to do, and then found a way to love it, right? So for me, it's always the prestige thing is fundamentally backwards. We tell kids today the way to be happy is to first of all correctly identify that which will make you happy, then borrow whatever money it takes to get happy, then get your magic ticket, then punch the clock, then pay your dues, and then finally you can be happy.
I like that theme. The idea that you can find a career where you actually want to get up in the morning and do it is a dream come true. Sure. A lot of people don't get there. They take jobs that really don't make them happy, but they have to eat, so they got to work. I think the real objective here, in answering Monty's question, circling back to what he's asking, is, if you really think being a doctor or getting, post-secondary education is going to make you a better person and make you more employable, you should do it. But the beef I have with everybody that thinks that way is, remember, you're going to get yourself $60,000 to $80,000 in debt. So you better do something where you can actually get a job. And what are those things? Well, I think there's the top three are engineering, and engineering.
Sure. But engineering is a perfect example of a job that's both blue and white collar. Yeah. There are so many facets of it, and it doesn't fit neatly into one vertical.
But it's so wonderful because it doesn't matter where on that spectrum you are, most engineers get employed, which is the goal.
Sure.
Because you're going to spend 4 years doing it.
And you're going to accrue debt, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? So 60, 70 grand a person, that's a personal tragedy. But add it up, it's 1.6 trillion right now. And we hold the note on that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not up there in Canada, but, down here.
Oh, no, it's worse up there. It's basically, education's free up there, but you're paying for it as a taxpayer.
How's it free? Nothing is free.
Exactly. But my point is, if you're going to spend 4 years, you're burning your own time. That's your own equity.
Right.
Don't waste it.
Yeah.
But Monty had a good question there. But I think my idea is find what makes you happy. I like that. But you get paid. Because you're not getting paid, you're not going to eat.
Or find what pays the bills and then figure out a way to be happy doing it. The people on dirty jobs didn't follow their passion, but they were passionate about what they did. That's what struck me. It was just backwards.
Nothing dirty about making dough. That's what I say.
I think a lot of people say it, but the way you say it, Kevin, it just sounds just damn credible.
I think we nailed Monty's question. Hit us with another one.
Thank you for answering my question today. My question is, what would you do, or what would you advise someone to do if they're spreading themselves thin with too many projects or ideas? I've currently am working 40 hours at my job. I'm getting ready to step into my dad's business that's online. I'm trying to run my own business, which isn't taking off very well. And if I fall back on one or the other and they seem to fail, I've got a third plan of running my own restaurant type deal in the works. Between that and trying to remodel my house that I've had for a year and I'm not even living in yet, what would you advise for someone who's trying to juggle too many things at once and how to make it work? Thank you.
Okay, that's too crazy. There's too much stuff going on there.
Well, he's shooting with a shotgun and he needs a rifle.
Yeah, it's brutal. My advice to him, Mike, is pick the top three on the hit parade. And even that's almost too much. But running a restaurant is, and I did that once, that is an 18-hour-a-day job. And so I'd kill that thing. Like that is so hard to make money in and really is a time killer. I like the idea of the leverage of maybe taking over his dad's online business because it's probably working and then figuring out a way to get more customers at a lower cost. I like a little focus. What do you think?
Well, he's got to figure out what he wants to be, I think. I mean, for me, I figure there are two basic types of people when it comes to getting something done. There are those who can truly multitask, and there are those who are...
Not many.
Not many. And that was my point. Multitasking gets all the glamour, and people talk about living in a non-linear world and the necessity of being able to juggle and spin the plates and all the metaphors. I'm a slave to chronology. The number 4 only makes sense to me when it comes after 3 and precedes 5. I do one thing and I go to the next thing. And then I build as best I can on that thing. But I don't know how people, I mean, I know how they do it. I can't do it. But to have these different branches coming off of the same tree and tending to them all contemporaneously, it's out of my pay grade.
My take is you get a core gig that you know you're good at and is your baseline. It's the thing you feed and maintain and make sure it works. You try and make it more efficient, whatever that is. And then if you're an entrepreneur and you want to explore something, and you can use an example like an Elon Musk who's a Uber entrepreneur.
Sure.
Tesla probably eats up 60%, 70% of his week, but he's also in the battery business and he's shooting stuff into space. I get all that, but the one that he cares about the most is the one that's having the biggest challenges of growth, which is Tesla right now. I know this because my son's an intern for him and he's focused.
Yeah.
He doesn't waste his time. He comes in, he works like hell, and I think everybody should find their Tesla, make sure that they're staying focused on that. And then if you want to shoot rockets into space or make batteries or do something else, that's cool. But unless you're a multitasker, a proven one, I think getting one thing right proves that you can do it is very important.
And what about once you get the one thing right, then you can be duplicative by simply taking that thing. Like, I was fired 3 times from QVC back in 1990. It was my first job in TV, and I learned some lessons there. And those lessons translated into Dirty Jobs 12 years later.
Yeah.
That show wound up in 200 countries. Since Dirty Jobs, I've done Somebody's Got to Do It, Returning the Favor, and The Way I Heard It. These are all the same basic show that all require me to apply the same basic lessons that I learned once upon a time. So if you glance at my resume for what it is, you see a bunch of stuff that looks disparate. In fact, I just change the name of the show every 5 or 6 years and keep doing the same thing.
It's great advice, and I think successful entrepreneurs have that common element, because I worked for 3 months once making cat food, and the guy who taught me how to do it was Dutch, and he said all cat food is either Sea of Japan tuna with different flavors in it, or it's beef lips and renderings of chicken heads boiled down to a broth and then flavor added to it. And the reason I like that story is decades later, when I was a co-founder of the Learning Company, it's math and reading skills that sell consumer software. And we went to the same model of cat food. We had one core engine, and then we just add another character to it. So you're reading with Rita Rabbit or Carmen Sandiego or any of the titles we did, they were just taking the same paste and adding and adding.
Right.
And I like those analogies. Once you understand what you're doing and you leverage it, I think there's a lesson for everybody in that, actually.
Well, and it goes to identity too. Like, how do you see yourself in your chosen field? How do you see yourself in your vertical? For me, the thing, because I felt a lot like that guy once upon a time. I just felt scattered, like just spread way too thin.
You can, in his voice, you could hear his desperation.
And the indecision.
Yeah.
I don't think he knows who he is. So right up until 2002, I made a decent living impersonating a host. That was my stock and trade. I could hit.
Oh, you don't want to hear that.
I could hit my mark. I could say my line, and I got paid for it. But on Dirty Jobs, I learned how to be a guest, and I still hosted shows, but I did it through a kind of the Greeks would call it a peripeteia, right?
Yeah.
An anagnoresis, where it's like, wait a second, what if I'm still a host in the credits, but what if I act like a guest, like an avatar or a cipher, and let somebody else be the expert?
Well, if you're honest about it, and because I've learned over time, people can smell bullshit a mile away. They're
More
really,
so today than ever,
Ever.
especially kids.
yeah, and they get it. And so, if you're trying to be something you're not, it's not going to work. But getting back to this guy, I think our collective advice is pick one thing and make it happen.
Yeah.
And then prove you can do that. And once you've got that humming and efficiently working and you've nailed it, then add to your dilemma, as I like to say. Do something else. But the one core there I heard was the dad's business. My bet is that's working. He could get focused on that, maybe enhance it, eventually take it over. That's what families are for. Maybe that works. But interesting question. Raised a lot of issues we discussed there.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Right. Particularly if it makes no money. All right, next on the hit parade.
Hi, Mr. Wonderful. First of all, thank you for having this opportunity for all of us to ask questions and learn from somebody as successful as you are. I have recently become a director of operation for a business, and I have never had a position of this scale before. And I really need some feedback from you to help me become a better leader, to become somebody that has enough empathy and understanding for people, but somehow has enough toughness to be able to put the business first. I find myself struggling between being humane and being a leader, and I really would want to find that balance, and I would appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
I like that question. This is a question about leadership. And I'm going to take a stab at it, then I want to hear your view of this. So Jasmine is trying to figure out how to manage people, and that is tough. There's no question. There is no one perfect way. Part of it's your personality, part of it's how people respect or don't respect you. My take of it, and what I've learned works for me, because I've worked with a lot of teams, I've been both a leader and an operator and an employee and you name it, is you sit down with your team one at a time. Go out for a coffee or whatever and say, look, what can you do in the next 3 months for me? What can we agree on as a goal that you buy into? That right here and now, what is it going to be? You're going to do X, whatever it is. And we shake hands on this thing and I get out of your way. I'm not going to be all over you for the next 3 months. You're either going to make it or you're not. So don't sell me something you can't deliver. Make sure as we go through this little meeting that you can deliver on this. I know you might try and sandbag me, that's okay too, but I just want to know, what are you committing to now? I'm going to write it down and we're going to meet up again in 90 days and you're either going to have made it or not.
Yeah.
I found that works.
Jasmine, I think you're going to be fine. I think she's going to be fine because she used the magic word in her question, and the magic word is empathy. You don't hear it much today. You hear sympathy, and of course you hear leadership, and you hear authenticity, right? There are a lot of buzzwords, but empathy, like real empathy, is impossible to fake. And the only way your people will empathize with you, in my view, is if they see you doing their job, or at least trying to. And that's all I do. That's all my brand is. If I did one smart thing looking back, it was figuring out how to get paid to try. Not succeed, but try.
Not easy to succeed all the time.
It's impossible, but it's easy to try all of the time. And so if you want someone's respect, in my opinion, then the best thing you can do for them is to show an interest in the job you hired them to do. Let them see you trying to do that. That's when real empathy goes back and forth. And I look at people differently who I've seen try to do my job, and I think vice versa. So, it's such a fluid marketplace today, and work looks different than it used to. It just looks different.
I found the biggest impediment to getting people to do great work is you're in their face too much. You overmanage them. You don't let them find other ways and paths that you never thought of.
Yeah.
So, Jasmine sets up a goal for one of her team members and says, look, go make it happen. Stand back. Let them do their thing, and you'll find out what they're good and not good at. And look, if they consistently can't deliver, well, you got to take them out behind the bar, and you know what has to happen.
Right.
But generally speaking, people will find their own ways to get things done if they believe it's a fair deal, that you've let them buy into something and you both agreed they're going to do it.
But that's if you're in an outcome-based environment.
Which often what work is.
Right, except when you sit down with the handbook and the protocols, and there are many institutions today that still say, look, this isn't the result we need. They're saying this is how we need you to behave in order to get the result we want.
I'm not a fan of that. I find it creates a lot of inefficiency.
Sure.
I'd rather have a maverick renegade get something done without looking at the rule book, because at the end, getting the results are what I covet, particularly as an investor. So, most of my companies are small. The average is 26 people in size.
Yeah.
I don't care how they do it. Just get it done. And at that size, maybe that's what matters the most. You're talking about big institutions. That is a big problem. When you're a renegade and you piss everybody off, even if you're successful, they don't like you.
No.
But on the other hand, getting stuff done is always rewarded in every culture, in every business. You have to balance it. I don't see a lot of people getting whacked that get stuff done unless they've really broken the rules. And in these days, that involves a lot of stuff that didn't used to matter in the 60s, but now there's issues. But that's a great question. I'm glad she asked it. I think we gave her some good advice.
Look, I don't want to overstate it, but maybe the best advice ever, really.
Yeah, I think
You're welcome,
so.
Jasmine.
Both you and Mike Rowe have partially achieved your success through show business. So what can you say to convince the youth of today that show business, YouTube fame, movie fame, any kind of fame, isn't the only answer. What can you say to convince them that there's more than just being famous?
Heather asks a really great question because I have a new perspective on fame. And I'll tell you a great story. When Shark Tank first started, nobody watched it. There was a cat and a dog watching it for 3 years. It got canceled 3 years in a row. And every year there'd be a new executive at ABC Network that said, let's give it another chance. And then the fourth year, for reasons nobody really understands, it goes from 0 to 10 million eyeballs watching it. You know, stuff happens. And that's when the first time ever, I went into a washroom in Boston Logan Airport, and no one had ever recognized me before or anything. And I'm doing my business in the urinal, and the guy keeps looking over at me. And after like 3 gazes, he says, "Are you that guy on Shark Tank?" I said, "Wow, somebody's watching Shark Tank." That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And he says, and I say, "Yeah, I'm that guy on Shark Tank." And he says, "You're an asshole." And he gives me this diatribe about how it was unfair to somebody, or the deal was too rich or whatever. And my wife and my daughter Savannah are waiting outside for me, and he storms out, and I didn't know this till later, but he says to my wife, "Hey, that asshole Kevin O'Leary's in the men's room." And she says, "I know." But that to me was the beginning of the journey of entrepreneurship in terms of fame, because the guy that was running the network at that time said to me a year later, "How are you loving this celebrity? Tell me the truth. How are you really loving it?" And there is downside to it. I've always thought the best part of it was, for me, is I can use this fame to help somebody acquire customers at their business at a lower cost, which is all I do now.
Sure.
I got 50 companies. I spend most of my day using my celebrity to help them get into Walmart, get into Target, get into Best Buy or beyond, because I can call the CEO and they return my call, which is great.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of it. And there's some downside to it too.
So Heather, I mean, yeah, everybody wants to be famous, but nobody quite knows how to do it. There is no playbook, and I think that's a good thing, because fame isn't supposed to be a goal. It's supposed to be a symptom. It comes from being respected or from doing a good job. And it's easy to confuse fame with celebrity. I talked to your kid about, why do you want to be famous? Why do you want people to know you? Because I can make a long list of people I know who I don't respect. Would you rather be well known and not respected, or simply known because you did something, like maybe embarrass yourself on American Idol or on Shark Tank? Maybe you're famous because you went on Shark Tank and all the sharks laughed at you, and now the whole country knows who you are. You don't really want that, right? You don't really want fame. What you really want, I bet, is something like self-respect.
So Heather, I'm going to tell you something that you have to tell your child, because they're old enough to understand this. In life, it's extremely difficult to try and set goals on an attribute you can't control. You can't control fame. You can't make yourself famous. It's a derivative of something you did or achieved, or that you could control that went well. And so if you really want to set up your child for I'm going to say a good life, make sure they don't start working on things they can never achieve because they can't control them, and that would be fame. And the thing about fame is, it shines the light on some and sets the others free, and there's nothing you can do about it. I would tell that to your child. Do not set them up saying you're going to be famous no matter what happens, because that just isn't true. But you can have a great life achieving the things and the goals that you can actually control.
Hey, Mr. Wonderful. I'm from Paris, so excuse me for my accent. I heard you saying that you should be ruthless in business. Also, Mark Cuban says that it's like a sport, but it's 24/7 competition. So I know that I am not that competitive, and I care about others' feeling. Also, I don't like to make people not love me. So I never experience how my personality would be in the business world and entrepreneurship, because I'm just starting this path. So my question is, Do you think I should change my personality in order to succeed in the business world?
John, bad news. You can't change your personality. You can try, but people will smell the bullshit a mile away. You are what you are. And the truth is, business is competitive. Get over it. It's a form of war in some ways, and you will never, ever, ever get everybody to like you, ever. And if you spend your time worrying about that, you will fail for sure. You can't care about what people think. As long as you think you're doing the right thing, they'll end up respecting you. They may not like you. That's certainly my situation. I don't care if you like me. I care that you respect me and that I am being honest with you about what I expect you to do for me if you're working for me or if I'm investing in you. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to get up in the morning understanding there's some guy in Mumbai or Shanghai or somewhere in China that wants to kick your ass and is coming for you 24/7, because it's true. And if you can deal with all that, you'll be okay. It's a great question.
It is a great question, and listening to you talk about it, it goes back to authenticity, right? People like you because they don't like you.
That's true.
You've been very consistent with your brand and your persona. This guy sounds like a sweetheart. He sounds, very empathetic. He sounds like probably who he is. That doesn't mean you can't function in the deep end of the pool. That doesn't mean you can't compete. It just means you shouldn't pretend to be somebody you aren't. Because, look, in my business, authenticity is for sale everywhere, but especially in my business. You said it before, people can smell a fake. I think they can smell it in the boardroom just as easily as they can smell it in the sewer. Yeah, so John, you can't change your personality, but you can change the rules of the game you choose to play, in my opinion. My business model for 14 years was based on imitating hosts. And in this business, you can get away with it. And I was pretty good at it. And I wasn't looking for a hit show. I was looking to take my retirement in early installments so that I could work a month here, take a month off, a month there. Well, in the entertainment business, you can do that. And I figured out how to do that. And it worked for a long time. And then one day I was 42 and I didn't have a lot of meaning in what I was doing, so I decided to reinvent myself to a certain degree and become more of a host, or more of a guest and less of a host, really. And that's when I wound up becoming the person I actually am. That's just a long way of saying, again, you can't change who you are. It took me 14, 15 years to figure out how to...
That is the best advice you could give anybody, because if you start a career or a path where you think you can morph yourself into something else and be honest about it, it just isn't going to happen.
No.
And all the way through, everybody around you is going to just smell it and know you're just being who you're not.
And if you look at the people who get all the press today, it's not the people who really cut through. I mean, Elon Musk, say what you want about him, he's a known entity now. He's a
brand.
He is a reflection of his identity. He knows exactly who he is. And John, you can be, I think, exactly who you are and a complete failure. You can also be exactly who you are and be a wild success.
But I like the fact that he wants to take a shot at it. And I think, John, go get it. Give it a shot. Mike, sitting right in front of me is this book.
Handsome book.
Yeah, very attractive. I like the guy on the front. Mike Rowe, The Way I Heard It, right here. What's this about?
Well, I started writing a podcast about 3 years ago in the style of Paul Harvey. You remember the rest of the story?
Of course.
So short biographical mysteries about famous people. And you get to figure out who I'm talking about as I write them. Anyway, the podcast turned into a thing. 130 million downloads, and a publisher.
That is a thing.
It's a thing. And the publisher said, you should put 50 of them together. We'll put a hard cover on it and it'll be a book.
So you extracted the very best of the podcast, put it in a book.
That's what I was going to do. And I showed it to my mother. And she said, oh, Michael, what an amazingly lazy way to publish a book. So I said, well, what do you suggest?
At least she's being honest.
She's honest. And my mom's a best-selling author, And so I listened to her. And she said, what do you want me to do? She said, why don't you write a memoir of sorts about why you chose to write about these famous people you've never met. So,
And what you know about it.
or is there something in your own life that rhymes with something in theirs? So basically, the way I heard it started as a collection of my favorite podcast stories. It became a memoir that is interrupted every other chapter by a truish story of a famous person who I've never met.
That's cool. All right. Look, everybody on Ask Mr. Wonderful, check this out. This is good advice from a guy that knows what he's doing. I like that. You know, books are tough. They're they're really, I've done 3 of them myself, and I know it's like giving birth. It's not easy.
Everybody should write a book, and everybody should wait tables.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't mean to, but you wind up putting yourself on the couch.
I have a lot of respect for anybody that gets it done, because I know how hard it is.
Well, thanks.
Check it out.
Hey, Mr. Wonderful, this is Sujay. I'm 39 years old. I invested in 3 entrepreneurship ventures, mostly a lot of my personal time and energy into it, a little bit of my personal money in one of them, although all 3 did not cut it. How does one reset and rebound after such failures, especially when such failures get tagged on to your resume and it's hard to find new investors? Does that mean I'm pretty much a dead cockroach? Thanks.
Well, I'll start answering that question this way. I would personally rather invest someone who has felt the sting of failure and is motivated by the fear of failing a 4th time than someone who thinks they can never fail, because it will visit everybody. It just does. I've had plenty of failures. Sometimes it's luck, Mike. Sometimes it's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time 3 times in a row, and the 4th is the one that's going to work. I'd invest in that guy.
Sure.
I think he probably has learned something from his mistakes, and that's sometimes what they are. But failure, I mean, it is just part of everybody's life, and there's many ways to fail. And it's really easy to fail and very hard to succeed.
If you learn something from your failure, it's not a failure. The only real failure, of course, is the failure to try. Right, and again, that's Dirty Jobs 101. For me, you know, once I really let go of my ego, right? 14, 15 years in the business, you get used to looking a certain way and you acting like you know more than you look. Dirty Jobs required me to fail day after day. I was an apprentice. I was Groundhog's Day for me in a sewer every day. I'm showing up on a new job site knowing nothing. And not only am I really forced to learn everything I can on that day, I have to do it on camera. I'm getting the pie in the face over and over. Once I realized that in fact, was a kind of blessing, my career changed incredibly. You know,
I think the whole issue of failure, people are so scared of it, but it visits everybody. That's what I tell them. And I teach this stuff. I try and teach it. I say it's going to happen. I guarantee you. And it's going to be miserable when it happens. And even worse if it's your own money, which happens a lot. But at the end of the day, you should know with certainty that everybody around you that's successful has already tasted that sting. Yeah. There isn't a single entrepreneur I've met that's been successful that can't list a whole bunch of disasters they were involved in.
And is there anything more breathtakingly dull than somebody who was born into a fabulous trust and who never really failed at anything?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and say, if you're telling me all you've had in your life is success, I know you're lying to me. That's what I know, because it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. That's just the nature of entrepreneurship. Okay, so Sanjay, let me tell you something. If I worried about what people thought about me as I was going through my journey as an entrepreneur operator, I would have never done anything. You just can't let that get in your way. You got enough problems just running a business to worry about, oh, I wonder what they think about me. You should be saying to yourself, who gives a shit? I'll get this thing done and people respect me for the way I did it. That's it. That's the end of the day. And not everybody will be your friend or like you as a result. You know, it's tough, but that's just the way it is.
Sanjay, yeah, you're right. I don't have a lot of experience with investors, but I have a lot of experience in trying to get people to like me. And what I've learned is that you can't ignore them. You actually work for them. The customer is your boss. But the minute they think you're trying to win their favor instead of being who you are, they will eat you. They will eat you alive, right?
Spit you out.
And then just laugh about it. I see this on Facebook every day. I fight with people on Facebook. I welcome negative comments because I engage with them respectfully and I argue from the middle and I try and get them to change their mind. But I don't beg them to. Does anything stink more than desperation? They can smell it on you.
It's interesting to let people that criticize you get to you. That's a horrible weakness. You have to get callous. You have to understand you can't please everybody, and they'll be attacking you all the time. But I had a great mentor. He's dead now. He used to be a hockey coach, and Jerry Patterson was his name. And he said, "You got to shut out the noise. You have to set the goal every day, focus on that, and everything else is irrelevant."
Yeah.
He was a great coach that way. He really was very good, and I've always remembered that. I always remember Jerry sitting on my shoulder saying, "Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant."
Your fans are your fans because they don't believe that you're desperate to have them as fans. You gave them a chance to like you or not like you, and
maybe they
either
do,
way.
maybe they don't. Yeah. So what do you do when something terrible happens in your life? And it will happen. In life, poo-poo happens. It just does. It happens to everybody. And, you know, I can think about when I was young, my dad died when he was 37 years old. I was, 8. That's not supposed to happen. And it really had a huge impact on my brother and I, who was 2 years younger than me. But I remember thinking through that saying, I can't control that. There's nothing I can do about it. I've got to live with it now. And just, even at that young age, realize, wow, life's tough. And then you die. Like, think about that. And if you want to be miserable thinking that way, that's how you'll be. But you've got to realize that everybody deals with it. You are not alone, and there's people around you that love you and want to support you. But I guarantee to everybody that's listening to The Answer that something horrific will happen to you in your lifetime, and you'll have to take the punch and get up and just drive on.
See, you would never think of it like this, but I swear, the parallels between Dirty Jobs and Shark Tank are amazing.
In using the platform of television to promote something.
But the sheer people think Dirty Jobs was a love letter to blue-collar work. It was actually a love letter to entrepreneurship.
Great.
40 of the people we featured on there, of the 300, were multimillionaires. Nobody knew it because they were covered in crap.
It's great that it celebrated work. It didn't matter if you had a PhD. That had nothing to do with it.
No, not at all. But what you had to be able to do was pivot. I remember a guy named Matt Freund in New Canaan, Connecticut, had a dairy farm. Going down just circling the drain.
Tough business.
The milk costs, everything, cost of operating. This guy was heating his entire farm with cow shit, right? And that was smart. And then he realized that the petunias in his garden were growing like crazy because he was putting them, he called them cow pots, just these molded, extruded, hardened pots made of cow crap. And you put the flour in there, and when it biodegrades,
fertilizer and everything.
Well, I heard about that. I took the crew there, and we looked at the dairy farmer who realized his cow's crap was more valuable than its milk, told that story. He's in Walmart 3 months later.
Smart.
Selling cow pots. So yeah, on the one hand, we crawled through sewers, but and then he changed it to poo pots, actually.
But that's the pivoting idea, It's a lot of entrepreneurs that have shown up in Shark Tank with one idea. It's been on so long that we have them coming back saying, that last idea I had, just kidding, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Here's my new idea. And we bring them back.
Well, what do you tell 20-year-olds who are like entering the market today and they have their idea, their precious idea, or maybe they don't, maybe they just have ambition? How do you counsel them to find the right balance that's going to lead to something that looks like success?
I say to them, go get some sales. Go sell some of this to somebody.
Right.
Prove to me that not your mother or your aunt or your father. Sell it to somebody you don't know and get 100 people to buy it, and then listen to what they have to say. Show me that you can actually sell it. That is the beginning of a wild journey for most people, because they realize how hard it is, but also when they start to get traction, they know it's working and they start to modify. That's the biggest thing for me, are these young entrepreneurs. Sometimes they're 18 and they come in and they've already sold $2 million worth of something. I don't mean a Kickstarter campaign. I mean they've run around their neighborhood and sold it.
Collected the money.
And collected the money and actually manufactured it and built it. I know kids like that are going to make it because they know how tough it is. Entrepreneurship is a bitch. Yeah. It's really hard. I don't have to tell you that. And the ones that get it realize it's a 25-hour-a-day job, and it changes your life. And it's not always to the best for people, but if it works, here we are, talking about it and the road traveled and how interesting it was. And I think it's still the road ahead.
Hello, I'm Mike Rowe. Do you suffer from a curious mind with a short attention span? Are you tired of 3-hour podcasts that go on and on and on? I can help.
Listeners of The Way I Heard It report heightened intelligence, satisfied curiosity, and sudden bursts of laughter. If your podcast lasts longer than 2 hours, see a doctor, then spend 10 minutes with Mike Rowe and watch what happens.
In other words, if you're like me, 10 minutes is all you need.
Okay, so I'm working on a new track. I call it Six String Strut. I recorded the bass track back on October. And you know, the way things go today is the technology is so advanced. I've got this little Spire recording system I picked up at the Berkeley auction, and I can take it anywhere. Grab a mic, cable. I leave some guitars at various hotels that I stay at in New York and LA. And just to mess around, you can basically, all you need is a room with good tone. So, I recorded right off the amp when I used my 61 Strat to lay down the bass track, which I consider Stradivarius of a guitar, just beautiful. But now I want something really bright on the acoustic side, so I'm using this Hudson Dalton, which I picked up a couple of years ago. I went in to buy a Martin, and I fell in love with this Hudson Dalton. And it's just such a bright instrument, and I thought it'd be great for laying down some acoustic lead on top of this electric kind of shuffle. It's kind of bluesy, kind of a jazzy vibe. You'll hear it in a second. Here we go. This track.